Welcome to Ecologic for the month of November. What a beautiful time of the year. Great rain last night, and I was sleeping in a tent in the woods with the Boy Scouts, and there's nothing greater than sleeping in the tent in the pouring down rain, as long as you're dry. The key to it. But I was dry, and it was a beautiful night. Woke up to a little drizzle at 6:30 or so, and then the weather got gradually better and turned out to be a beautiful day. So up at Boy Scout, teaching a bunch of Boy Scouts how to survive in the wilderness, how to deal with first aid, how to do public speaking and law merit badge and all these things that enrich the minds of young boys. So we have with us as our guest Vic Hummert, a long-time environmental activist, writes a lot of letters to the editors in the Daily Advertiser, and is a recognized columnist, an advocate for the environment, for clean water, the world's oceans, and a bunch of other things that relate to the environment. Welcome, Vic.
Good to be here, Harold.
And how did you arrive here in the Promised Land? What brought you to Louisiana?
I came here as the chaplain for Hospice of Acadiana.
Oh, wow. And it was when hospice was just getting started, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
20 years ago.
Oh, neat. Wow.
20 years ago.
It's amazing you've been here that long.
20 years.
Right. That is wonderful. And your home base is Illinois, is it?
Breeze, Illinois.
Breeze, Illinois.
Population now 4,000 people.
Then you've kind of lived around the world, haven't you?
Lived in Hong Kong, lived in Bolivia and Venezuela.
Even Cuba for a while?
Short time in Cuba.
Well, they got rid of you real quick in Cuba, right?
Well, I did. My Spanish is not that good, and they speak Spanish very fast over there. I couldn't keep up with it. No, I'm glad that I came back to the States and got involved in environmental education in Texas 25 years ago.
Wow.
And came here.
Well, that was an incinerator that y'all were fighting in Texas, and then what was the big incinerator they wanted to put in Amelia that we fought tooth and nail
GTX.
for? GTX.
4 years.
Yes.
You dragged me into
Yes, right. And
GTX.
we finally won that battle.
We
I
beat
don't know
it
how,
twice.
but we did.
We beat it twice.
Yeah, right. Thanks to a lot of hardworking people, and I think the churches were somewhat involved in that, especially the Bishop of Houma.
Bishop Gerald, who's now the bishop here.
Yes.
He openly spoke against it when he was a
Right.
bishop of
And,
Houma.
wow, it would have been trouble with incinerators is that this is a burning of products, and generally speaking, what lands in a chemical incinerator is unknown mixes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know what your liquid product is, you know what it is, you can recycle it. If it's gasoline, old diesel fuel, old paint, all these things can pretty much be recycled. But if you take brake fluid and you take, transmission fluid, you mix it, that becomes an unknown mix. And you can't just send it, nobody will buy it.
No.
If you know the identity of it, you can recycle it. There's plenty of buyers for old transmission fluid, old engine oil,
Yeah.
but when you mix it, then you got a problem. And there lies a problem of determining the impact on air quality.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just like a computer. If you put an unknown in, you're going to get a very unknown result. And the same with incineration. Unless you know exactly what's going on you cannot predict what products will be blown out of the smokestacks and where it'll go and where it'll land. And there's some real bad items out there, dioxin and mercury and all that kind of stuff. And putting it up in the atmosphere is terrible because it does eventually end up in the waterways. It ends up on the grass that the cows eat. And then we buy the milk in the store and the chemicals are
Becomes
going
us.
right. That's right, coming right back to us. So
Well, I had an informer during that GTX struggle. a man who was invited to be an investor because it would be a real profitable thing. And he said to the other people, "Are you crazy?" He said, "I have 3 boys and I don't want them ingesting any of that toxicity." So he turned against them and became an informer for me. And the last words I had with him, shortly after we defeated, he said, "The other investors are very, very angry with you." And he used some invectives, some foul language, which I won't repeat on your program. I said, "They ought to be angry at each other for poisoning their own children."
Yeah, and the profits really, I mean, are profits that important? And you can look at, the copper industry in Montana. They just polluted thousands of acres of river valleys. And the valleys were the prime property. This is where you raise your hay and you raise cattle and gardens and wow, and blasting the mountains in Tennessee and Kentucky. How terrible that is,
Well, you know the Hebrew
We're
word
doing
for
it in North Louisiana,
That's right.
same thing. Is our need for electricity so insatiable that we can turn our heads on this rampant environmental destruction? You go up to Mansfield, Louisiana, and you look at 20,000 acres of just moonscape, what was a beautiful pine forest. They have to dig up 50 feet of everything, roads and bayous and lakes and ponds and home sites, and to get to the coal that's a seam 200-300 feet below the 50 feet overburden. And then each scoop of this big dredge is 77 cubic yards. This dredge is 28 stories high.
Mhm.
And this is lignite coal, this one step up from dirt. It has such low energy that it's not worth shipping it. It can only produce electricity where you mine it. And so we're doing that.
It's a British company also, isn't it? A British company doing that?
No, it's Clico.
Clico?
No, it's not at all a British company. Clico, who is just, planning to sell to an Australian, Canadian combine, financed by Macquarie Bank. But anyway, it is Clico. But the Dolet Hills Mines is the ones actually mining the lignite coal for Clico. And I think that is a British concern.
Uh-huh.
So devastating, and the travesty of that is the state requires recovery only after the total resource has been mined. The estimated resource is 150 million tons. And from 1985, when they started, to 2005, in 20 years, they mined 15 million tons. So by my estimate, it'll be about 180 years before they have to plant the first pine tree to recover. Wow. And it's appalling that politicians have allowed this. The worst part of it is the Mansfield battlefield. What actually occurred, the park, is where the initial battle took place. There's 2 other battles in retreat, when the Union troops retreated, and I think it was 1864, April of 1864, where General Mouton was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Prominent from Lafayette, Brigadier General Mouton. His statue is at the old City Hall. And there are thousands of both Union and Confederate troops that are buried there.
And that's all going to be scraped
And
away.
they've all been, that's right. And as they say, the bones of the Union and Confederate troops burn just as good as the coal. And it's a horrible thought that we have so little regard for those men that gave their lives for either side.
Well, Chief Seattle said it. The Europeans will desecrate our sacred burial grounds, kill our buffalo, poison our rivers, the air.
They'll poison their own nest, is the way the chief put it. Poison our own nest.
And memorize that, huh?
Yes, I have. Where's the wisdom from someone that didn't go to college?
But he didn't talk about the ocean.
Yeah, and it's all, I guess it was John Muir that says, you pick up anything and is connected to everything else.
Mhm.
And our oceans is certainly in that category. And I fish a lot on the oceans, and I bemoan the loss of fisheries resources, shrimping. When we were 11, 12 years old, we were running a shrimp boat, the 45 foot of the Patsy Louise, had a 40 horsepower Palmer diesel. And old man Moss sent us to the Shell Morgan's gas station, the marine station, to fill up the boat. And it used diesel fuel. And he gave me a $20 bill. And I said, well, Mr. Moss, how big is the tank? He says it's 300 gallons. But he says, I think there's 40, 50 gallons left. So $20 bill, the diesel was 8 cents a gallon. So I got about 250 gallons for that $20 bill. It's just amazing. And the next day we out trawling, and we had a Big Ben alarm clock. And we'd set it for 15 minutes. Now, this boat had a big old prop, and it could really pull a mule. Didn't go very fast, only about 6 miles an hour. Took us 3 hours to get to Southwest Pass from Intercoastal City. And that's if we weren't against the current. And so we trolled 15 minutes, and we pulled a 40-foot net. And they had boards, spread of boards as big as those doors right there. And we evidently didn't set the alarm clock right, because we pulled about 30 minutes. And this shrimp boat had big old winches to lift the catch, and had a big arm that would go over the side, and you'd hook up to the ball of stuff. And we'd have turned the boat over if we'd tried to lift it. And it had so many shrimp and fish and crabs in there. We had to go to the beach, get in the water, cut the net open with our pocket knives, and take dip nets. And that was 9 o'clock in the morning, and we got through. The sun was just going down. This was in July. So it took us all day because we drove 30 minutes instead of 15. And Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries say we have as much shrimp as we used to have, many years ago. That is not true at all.
Those days are gone?
Those days are gone. You could go with a 16-foot troll and troll right along the beach, and troll for an hour or two, and catch 150, 200 pounds with a little 16-foot net of beautiful shrimp. And those days you didn't have much icebox space, so you try to hit them as you would go. But then you look at the tarpon, which was a sport fish. It's not an edible fish. That Louisiana coastal area had enormous tarpon populations. The New Orleans Tarpon Rodeo, the world record tarpon came from that New Orleans Tarpon Rodeo in Pass Manchac. And, I don't know, it was 270 pounds or something like that. And,
How long would that be?
that's a 7-foot fish. That's a big, big fish. And now you can't find a tarpon in Lake Pontchartrain.
I believe that.
They had them in the basin, and Bayou Long and Bayou Pigeon, and they spawned up there. And they went and dredged this super channel through the basin and cut off the path that the tarpon would take to get to their nest, their spawning grounds. And it's amazing, just this year, tarpon were caught in nets right about I-10.
Really?
So those fish are still looking for the spawning grounds,
There's still a few around.
That they were, well, there are a few around, but they're getting real scarce. They used to have a tarpon fleet at Sycamore Point, and that's gone. And you could go out to the Gulf on a calm day, and you'd see schools of tarpon that would cover 1,000 acres.
Wow.
Schools just surfacing and feeding and so forth, and that's gone.
I arrived here too late, huh?
Yes, I guess. So the world's oceans, and the big, for U.S., the dead zone in the Gulf is second only to the Baltic Sea, according to...
I just looked this up today because I want to have fresh information. There are, according to a book called, a periodical called Bioscience, there are 146 global dead zones, 43 in the United States, and the Baltic Sea in Russia has the largest dead zone, and the Gulf of Mexico has the second largest. So we're only second. But that's pretty serious, huh? The hypoxia,
Hypoxia, and this is nutrient enrichment, where fertilizers, untreated sewage, and runoff from golf courses and people's lawns and over-fertilized farms, and all these things contribute to nutrient enrichment. The runoff from cattle feeder lots, from pig feeder lots, and the combined animal feeder operations. I think we have 15 million people living in North Carolina. We have 20 million pigs. And we treat the effluent that comes from people, but not from pigs. And so this ends up in our oceans, and it's just amazing how we kind of disregard it. And one thing this nature is wonderfully forgiving. When the insult to water quality stops, that water quality improvement is quickly sensed by the natural world, and recovery occurs. And that's our hope, is that we quit doing it. As
you're right. It takes that conscious.
Honoré says, we're stuck on stupid.
But we have a 40-year learning curve, You don't smoke cigarettes, I don't smoke cigarettes. And it took how many decades to get off of cigarettes?
Oh, I remember in Lafayette about 20 years ago, I proposed a no smoking ordinance in all public places of assembly.
And they blew you out of the room.
Oh man, I got calls from people in the business that they'd never buy another car from me, and yak. And, I remember one guy calling me and he gave me I'll never buy another car from me. And he called about 3 years later, and he said, I can't tell you how wrong I am about, cigarettes. He says, I now have lung cancer. And he says, I apologize, and I'm sending my wife over to get a new car. So, wow.
Well, it's that consciousness, I think, that will make us aware of the fact that the oceans are dying. It sounds like I'm an alarmist when I say that, but it's a fact. The acidification and plastification. Plastic is taking over the ocean. When the Malaysian airliner went down, the search planes and the boats they saw pieces out there. Well, that's certainly a part of the airplane. They pulled over close and examined. It was big chunks of plastic that were floating out there.
Styrofoam goes a long way, Vic.
Yeah.
We use it and we throw it away and get rid of it. It's just amazing. If you go along beaches, and our scout troop once a year takes a trip to Hackberry Island, and Cameron Parish is right where the Mermentau River reaches the Gulf. Mm-hmm. And we'll take 3 35-foot sections of beach, just selected at random, and count everything in it. Amazingly consistent. In 35 feet, we'll get 35 to 38 plastic bottles.
Yeah.
We'll have 5 to 8 aluminum containers. We'll have about 7 to 8 cigarette lighters. Usually about 8 to 10 shoes of different shapes and sizes. All these plastic shoes and flip-flops and tennis shoes, you name it, end up on our beaches. And you think, all right, we're getting 36 plastic bottles per 35 feet. In a mile, that's 5,280. You go 10 miles, there's 52,000 of these plastic bottles. And the appalling thing is that each one came from a human hand that says, I really don't care about our world. Flip it in.
Well, you see this picture here?
Yes.
Okay, those are things that just gradually made the way out.
Well, these are the things we find on the beaches, they're all, and I was on the beaches about 3 months ago, and I found about 20 pounds of marijuana, and I put it in a nice spot and called the sheriff's department and tell them to come get it, And then I'd found a bunch of cocaine, 82 pounds of it. And I think they estimated street value of about $2,700 an ounce. So this little pack of cocaine I found was about $2.5 million worth. That's about the size of a 48-quart Eagle Ice Chest. So
I hope you got a reward for that.
no, no, no. I didn't, and I'd have to be able to tell where it came from, and I don't have no idea where it came from. And it was sitting there on the beach. What was amazing to me, it had not been in the water, which would either someone placed it there by boat and left, waiting for someone else to come get it, or it was dropped by airplane.
It was wrapped in plastic.
It was plastic. It was in a sack, in a polypropylene sack, and very neatly tied, very neatly squared off. Beautifully packed, beautifully wrapped. Each pack was wrapped in about 2-inch clear plastic, very neatly done, in a small black visqueen bag, and then in a pressure pack. And it was amazing to see. So our beaches catch a lot of junk, stuff. And it's amazing in the dead zone. I'm involved in a wind company trying to get the wind business going in Texas offshore, and we have a meteorological tower in Galveston, 10 miles out in 51 feet of water. And University of Houston and Texas A&M Marine Division have all that test equipment out there, and they were kind of astonished. Let's see, we got a call. You on the air? Can we help you?
Yeah, first I want to thank you guys for publicizing the dire conditions of our oceans. And second, I'd like you to comment on Dr. Sylvia Earle's work, wherein she's determined that now that we know, we need to do something. And her famous quote is, "No more oceans, no more us." Could you comment on that, please?
Oh, thank you for the call. Yes, we will. We appreciate you calling in. Vic, can you address that?
Well, a friend of mine, I think the man who just called in might be that friend. He didn't identify himself. We were at Tulane University February 21st and 22nd this year, and we met Sylvia Earle, who's now 78 years old, and she's called her deepness because she's gone down 2,000 to 3,000 feet in a submersible, and she's examining the condition of the ocean. And down at the bottom of the ocean, what do you think she found? Plastic pieces down at the ocean. So anyway, she says the decisions we make in the next 10 years will be the most important decisions in history for the ocean. Because if we don't protect the ocean, we don't have a future. That's her contribution. The other person...
We can start with the Gulf of Mexico, right?
Gulf of Mexico, yes, the awareness. Well, that goes all the way up to my home state of Illinois.
And it's oxygen depletion as far as the dead zone in the Gulf, and the waves replenish the oxygen. High wind periods will replenish, but it only occurs to about a depth of 30 feet. And so the water's less than 30 feet, the bottom is in pretty good condition. The critters that live at the bottom, the Benthos community, they're all pretty much alive. Clams and oysters and barnacles and grubs and snails and worms, a whole list of critters that live in the first 3 or 4 inches of the bottom of the Gulf. At our test tower in Galveston, in 51 feet of water, there's barnacles from the surface down 31 feet. And then from the bottom up 20 feet, there's nothing. There's no barnacles alive. All that tests on the bottom for clams and oysters and grubs and all that, there's nothing. So the dead zone goes all the way to Galveston, and it was pretty much thought that the dead zone ended at the Sabine River. So the test from University of Houston and Texas A&M show definitely that is not true. It goes much further than our Marine Consortium is predicting.
Well, it's kind of depressing to talk about this, but the consciousness, like the consciousness of smoking, what it does to us, gradually turn things around. Now, my hero, I've told you about him before, is Dr. Semmelweis, the Hungarian doctor, who said to his friends, also doctors, when you're working in a hospital, you've got to wash your hands. And they told him he was crazy. And they set up a plot where they could capture him. And they put him in an institution. That's where he died. But it took 40 years to accept that simple lesson that you have to wash your hands.
Before you operate on someone?
Yeah. 40 years.
Look at how long it took for the cigarette, the people who were victimized by smoking cigarettes to actually get compensated.
40 years?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Well, the industry, had the best lawyers and had lots of money, and they could, say the sky was not falling when it was.
But do we have 40 years to mess around with transitioning?
Well, what are the cures for the dead zones? Where would you start?
Well, the awareness has to go up in my home state and in the Midwest, that all of these fertilizers that are going
Well, you
in.
got to raise this corn, Wait on that call. Let's check on that.
Well, I'll take that interruption.
You on the air? Can we help you?
Yes, I'm wanting to know what are we having? Do we have all of the plastics in the Gulf of Mexico? And I'm understanding that the plastics, they may break down in years to come, but they never go away. They just break down. They infiltrate our fish. They become part of us. And the plastics are terrible, terrible. What are we going to do about plastics?
Well,
Thank you for the call. We'll give you that answer off the line. The plastics, as pointed out to Boy Scouts, if you have landing on the beaches, 1 bottle per foot, and then most of these shoes are plastic, and then you got styrofoam that never go, all kinds of floats, from you name it, crab floats, they all end up on the beaches, and they do decompose and fall apart, and so I think the answer to plastics lies in modern chemistry, to develop water bottles, for instance, that decompose, without harming the environment. I think those are possible things, and then the idea that we would get the public to use reusable containers. The aluminum containers are very inexpensive, and the water you take out of your tap water, your faucet, is much better than anything you can buy, and so to use that rather than throw away bottles, I think would be a big step. But I think the answer probably lies in chemistry, to come up with products that would biodegrade without having a harmful impact on the environment.
yeah, I think that, again, the awareness, Mike Nichols, a famous movie director, just died last week, and he produced a movie called The Graduate. And if you all saw that movie, at his graduation, an uncle came along and said to him, I have one word for you, and that is plastic. That was in the 1960s, that movie. Well, I think now if we had a graduate, a wise uncle would come along and say, I have one word for you, son, garbage. Pick it up, clean it up. We just got to stop using plastic, that's all.
And it is amazing, the plastics that are used in these water bottles and, milk bottles and a lot of the beverage containers, are all recyclable.
And it infiltrates, it gets into the water.
But it is recyclable.
Yeah.
And it can be turned into a lot of useful products, and that needs to be pushed real harder. Lafayette has an excellent recycling program, but and during Festival International and other events, they have trash containers and recycling containers. So Lafayette kind of leads the way on that, and the community is to be commended for that. And but it needs to be extended. New Orleans doesn't have recycling. You go to Mardi Gras events, and and they don't recycle
Throw it
that
out.
stuff, and they throw it out, and then it ends up in the wrong places, you know, so.
Well, we need 1,000,
Recycling needs to be a big part of the answer.
we need 1,000 Griff Blakewoods, am I right?
Yes, I mean, Griff was, wrote the book, I guess. He's a UL professor and did a wonderful job in inspiring his students into environmental responsibility and acting on that need to deal with. You know, his theory was if you have leadership ability, you have knowledge, you know, you need to use that to make this a better world. And a lot of his students are doing exactly that. What a great, you know, credit and asset he was to this area and his community and his state. Sadly missed. Griff passed away about 7, 8 months ago, I guess.
May.
Big biking
May
out.
of this year.
Yeah.
Every time we see a bike trail in Lafayette, we should thank Griff Blakewood.
And mentioning bike trail, we officially opened the Schoeffler Basin Wilderness Bike Trail. It's 55 miles on top of the levee, and it's kind of a fun trip to take. The scenery from up there is beautiful. Cars and motorized vehicles are not allowed, so the bikes are safe. You can drive 50 miles, you can paddle 55 miles on there without a stop sign, without a store. There's no stores or support. There's a couple of houses along the way that are kind of like a few homes and a couple of camps, and state park is on the way, and there's some communities nearby. If you had a real need, you could go out and go a mile or two off course and pick up water or pick up refreshments or grab a snack from a store. But that's a wonderful thing, a wonderful way for people to enjoy the basin in an environmentally sound and beautiful way. So it's a safe place to bring youngsters to bike without having fear of them being run over by somebody going 80 miles an hour. And we've had some tragic bike accidents here, you know, and so it's sad to say that we really need to do a better job of, separating bikers from road traffic and automobiles and trucks.
Well, you and I know of a man who was driving 80 miles an hour in Kali Saloon.
Yeah, a lot faster than that. Wow. I was driving one of these real hot cars one day, and a guy coming from a stop sign from Vic's, and this guy passed me like a bullet, and I said, well, how fast is this guy going? And, you know, when I was up to 90, I still hadn't caught him. And
You two of you were crazy.
yeah, that's right. But I gave up very quickly gave that up. And this guy's going 100 miles an hour down to Kali Saloon. Man, it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But, you know, so amazingly, we have people that, you know, not aware of the danger that's brought on by that kind of driving activity.
Well, then the interrelationship between burning up all that gasoline and the carbon dioxide which circulates around the world and gets into the ocean. You know, the acidity in the ocean has gone up 30% since the pre-industrial age, and it causes hypoxia for us. There's such a thing as cerebral hypoxia because
Would it relate to this acid rain? And we had, you know, the lakes of the Adirondacks in Canada and all over, you know, they were becoming acid and causing lots of problems with the crawfish and a lot of the minnows and so forth that lived in these lakes that fed the larger fish was really upsetting the balance. And I don't know if that's changed a lot. It's not a big news item anymore. But
No,
the oceans are doing the same thing is happening to the oceans.
well, Sylvia Earle, she just needs to be looked up on the internet, and she's got a website called Mission Blue, and just an encounter with this woman really impressed upon my friend and myself from here. How
And wasn't Jacques Cousteau and his gang singing the same song? They were
oh yeah,
actually going through the oceans all over the world and looking at what's happening to it. The
He was-
coral and
he was so prophetic. He said decades ago that humankind now has the capacity to ruin the entire ocean. And I was thinking of, well, he's talking about two big tankers that are colliding in the North Sea in the darkness. No, it doesn't have to be that. It's the acidification, which is changing the composition of the ocean, and that's affecting all of us. It's affecting the fish. Someone gave me this book, and I don't know who, but I recommend it to everyone. And there's all kinds of good articles in here that explain how our future is intertwined with the future of the ocean. And the ocean is suffering now.
Well, and you know, when you look at the East Coast, the various fisheries along there in dire straits, you know, the Grand Banks are not producing the cod and the all the fish in Alaska certainly still is producing, but I mean, it's a limited entry fishery and very tightly controlled. And but the open oceans don't have those controls. So tuna and many of these fish are being probably way overfished.
Oh, the stocks have gone down.
Stocks are going down, and of course, a lot of the, you know, like in the Gulf, the commercial fishery, 90% of the commercial fish caught in the Gulf depend on Louisiana's marshes during the estuarine aspect of the marshes during their juvenile stages of life, and the blue crab and you know, the mullet and shrimp of many different species, and the pogie, the menhaden, all those important commercial fishes. Now the red snapper is not dependent on the marsh, but everything that it eats is dependent. And so they are tied together. So as we lose all this marshland, you know, it's contributing to this decline in the Gulf's fisheries.
Definitely. And because of the acidity in the ocean, the plankton are going down. And the plankton produce more than half of the Earth's oxygen. And if that's happening gradually, see, we don't see it happening, and that's why we're not panicking. Dr. Semmelweis knows that bacteria is going from one doctor's hand to the patient. And by trying to get them to change their frame of mind, they called him insane. You were called winged nut because you tried to stop smoking. Well, it took 40 years.
Yeah, and eventually, you know, laws were passed that you can't smoke in restaurants anymore, and you can't, you know, you really, I guess people can still, now even bars are blocked from having smoking.
Well, they're still debating that here in Lafayette. Can you stop the smoking in bars and restaurants? Still debating that.
Well,
but it's coming
It shouldn't
around.
be a debate, it's the question
No.
of health. And, you know, and we have another big issue here is the burning of the cane.
Yeah.
And, you know, to the guy, I was president of the Heart Association for a couple of years, and the pulmonists, the doctors who work with lung problems, you know, they all said the same thing. 90% of their business in the 3 months of the cane season.
Sure.
And people with emphysema, people with lung problems, with, you know, with asthma, and all this is triggered by the smoke in the atmosphere from, you know, dumping, you know, the chemicals that are on the cane, and it's just a horrendous insult to air quality. And, you know, the air quality problems land in the waters too. You know, we have big coal-fired plants all over Louisiana, and they dumping mercury and all kinds of stuff into the atmosphere. And why you can't eat king mackerel in the Gulf?
Yeah, well, this
Coal,
is 20 years
coal-
ago.
Well, it's
We're
still
told-
to that day, you're not supposed to eat king mackerel, which is a predator fish, has a delicious meat in it, you know, and but you're not supposed to eat it because it has a super high mercury content.
Well, it's the awareness that's increasing. A lot of people have heard of Thomas Merton, who's one of the most prominent spiritual writers of the 20th century. And in 1968, he wrote a beautiful essay called The Ecological Conscience. And that's what we got to do, develop an ecological conscience.
You mean we have to care?
That's it.
You on air? Can we help you?
Yes, hi. Yes, hello.
Hey, Woody, glad you called in.
How y'all doing?
Finally woke you up, right?
Oh, hey, I've been sitting here on the edge of my seat, looking for an opportunity to call.
Great. Thank you for calling in.
And the question is, what we know that protection of the environment is good for public health, it's good for our quality of life, but we also know that we have a spiritual and moral responsibility to take care of God's creation. Could you, Vic, tell us a little bit? I know that Pope Francis has had some great words about this recently, and the evangelical community has had some words about this subject. Could you tell us kind of what's going on in that realm of alerting humanity to their spiritual and moral responsibility to take care of God's creation?
Sure, glad to.
Response off the air.
Thank you so much for that question.
Well,
You're the authority in that field?
I'm not an authority on anything. But I do know that Pope Francis is coming out with an encyclical, which is a letter to the world on the environment. Now, he's in hot water because he criticized the economic system, which is causing so much injustice. When he comes out with his encyclical on the environment, it's going to blow the roofs out of a lot of the people's houses, the churches, because they don't want to touch this. You know, the environment, protecting the environment is still a very sensitive subject. But when the Pope writes an encyclical and says we have to protect the earth, well then, that's going to touch a lot of raw nerves, and we're going to have some wind in our sails. I say, well, we got the backing of the Pope on this. But go all the way back to January the 1st, 1990, Pope John Paul II wrote an encyclical called Peace with the Creator, Peace with All Creation. At that time, I had a TV show in San Antonio, and it was Texas is an energy state. So we had a big quote in the background of the room there, where the TV program was held. It said, all of humanity has an obligation to protect the environment. So we put that big quote, block print, on the back of the wall. So when we got phone calls attacking us for getting into an area that's not spiritual, I said, well, this is from Pope John Paul II, the encyclical. And if Francis does write something on the environment, that's going to be a big, big help for the Sierra Club and anybody trying to protect the planet. I just want to throw in something about, before I came here, I went to El Salvador for an environmental tour, and we went to San Salvador, the capital, and we met a man there who was in charge of a Center for Appropriate Technology. He spoke in perfect English, and he said, I want to welcome you all to El Salvador. But he said, I have some warnings for you. First of all, he said, you will get sick if you breathe our air. Secondly, you will definitely get sick if you drink our water. Third, do not eat from our table because you will get very sick. And then he says, the fourth danger is preaching the gospel. And I wanted to jump up and say, oh, good. Because for 25 years, I've been making care of the air, the water, and the soil as part of preaching. But he was referring to the Jesuits, 6 of them, who were killed in the capital by the government because they were spreading dangerous ideas.
Like taking care of the environment.
That's a dangerous idea.
Yes, right.
There's a man in town who told me, Vic, you have a lot of enemies here. I said, no, I don't. I don't have one enemy in the world. I go to bed every night without any negative feelings towards anybody. And I get up in the morning, same way. I said, if I have enemies out there, that poison is in their heart, not in mine. I'm just talking about taking care of the air, the water, and the soil. And with 3 questions, you can ask somebody, are you an environmentalist? They say, oh, no. Well, I say, I can prove that you are. Are you in favor of drinking good water? Yes, of course. How about breathing good air? Well, of course. How about the food you eat? Are you in favor of eating decent food? Well, yes, of course. Stupid question. And I say, well, you just proved to me you're an environmentalist.
Right.
Some people get off the sofa, some just, kind of listen. But
And that's such an important message that, we are accountable. I think the Almighty will hold us accountable for our ability to think and to speak and to walk and, those personal gifts. But we have the public gifts.
that's it.
The fantastic planet that we live on that we can mess up. You can look at the Native Americans, which, whom we treated as ignorant savages. But they lived in this North America for thousands of years, South America, without messing it up. In literally 1 century, we screwed it up to where we don't know whether it'll ever recover. So it's appalling. We had so much to learn from these Native Americans who, they lived on the bison, and they used every part of it, and they used the blood to cover the floor of their teepees. And we had so much to learn from them.
Hotline.
Oops, I hung up. Can you call back? I missed that. I missed the wrong button. Please call back. So, there we go. Excuse me for hanging up on you. How can we help you?
Oh, Harold, so what can we do to get back the kind of sentiment the Native Americans had about caring for the earth?
Vic mentions Chief Seattle's letter, where we don't know where our, grandfather's bones are, that we would poison our own nest. And the words of wisdom from Chief Seattle, who he wrote to the president, who wanted to buy their land up in Washington State, and he essentially said, we don't understand why the land is something to buy, because these are gifts from the Almighty, like the air and the waters and the ocean and the rivers. So yes, we have a lot to learn from the Native Americans, just their attitude. When they shot a buffalo, they used every part of it, and from the skin to the hooves to you name it, and we shot them just to see them fall, rotted by the millions. We killed 70 million bison in 5 years, when the then president in 1870 says, if we're going to get rid of the Indians, we have to get rid of his food supply. So the answer was to kill all the bison, and orders were put out to kill all the bison. As long as you had ammunition, shoot them. It was kind of silly, because the Indians could eat elk and they could eat rabbits and a lot of other things. They didn't have to have bison, so it's kind of a silly idea to start with. But it exemplifies the horrendous waste and wasteful attitude we had. And we did that with timber. We did that with fisheries resources. Look at our cypress swamps. We've destroyed it almost totally in Louisiana. We might have 1% left. The bottomland hardwood swamps are so bountiful in nature, that the home of the black bear and a lot of the critters, that we as taxpayers paid to decimate and destroy. 23 million acres in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We don't have 2 million acres left. And our tax dollars did that. So just our track record is horrendous, how we abuse and destroy and rape Mother Nature.
When was the last buffalo shot in Louisiana?
Wow, we had bison all over Louisiana, and I would guess, I would just be taking a wild guess, but I know in 1851 there was an Army scouting team. Yes, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello. We need to be talking about the things that maybe some of these people in these books are saying can be done. What can be done to start? I mean, we've got to start somewhere, and to recite the Indians' codes and feelings are wonderful, but that's in our past right now, and we need to take those and move them into our future. What are they saying in all of these books that we need to be doing about the plastics, about the contaminants we're putting in our waters that we have to drink from, eat from, live from, breathe from?
Okay, Vic, got a lead on that? Thank you for that question.
Vic, do you have some thoughts from your books that you've been reading?
Well, I tried to pick up a book from the library on the way here tonight, a book called Stung, S-T-U-N-G. And it's the best thing I've read since Rachel Carson's book, The Silent Spring. And there's one copy available here in Lafayette, but it's at the other library, not downtown. I guarantee if you read that book, it will be an awakening. It's such a spiritual problem that we're, basically ruining the ocean, and it's the shock of what we're doing that will begin this spiritual awakening. That's what I think we have to begin. And, talking about Pope Francis, Bartholomew was the Patriarch of Constantinople. 10 years ago, he said that any kind of damage to the environment is a sin. And I was told 25 years ago, you're not going to make any progress unless you tell people it's a sin to destroy the water and a sin to poison the air and mess up the food. Well, I don't like to throw sin out too much, but it's basically a spiritual desecration of God's gift. So it's a spiritual crisis that we're talking about. And having lived in Hong Kong 10 years, the word for crisis is two words. It's a danger plus an opportunity. So this is a dangerous time right now because never has the planet been so threatened as it is right now by us. And the opportunity is, first of all, a spiritual change, an awakening to the fact that cigarettes are deadly, and what we're doing to the ocean is not conducive to our future. So with this awakening, we will begin to change our pattern of life. When we're not in a room, turn the lights off, turn the lights off. Recycle everything, thanks to the Sierra Club and Harold. We got recycling going in Griff, Blakewood. Renewable resources, I think, is something we really have to get into.
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
Look at our neighboring state of Texas, how they're 11% renewable right now, which is astonishing. As big as the state of Texas is, they produce half of the renewable energy in the country. And, and they lead the country in new jobs. In the last 5 years, more jobs have been created in Texas than all the rest of the states combined. And they lead in renewable energy. They're producing, some number, we're producing 40,000 megawatts in the country, and Texas is 20,000.
That's where the future is, in renewables. And Griff Blakewood, again, I go back to Griff, he's a friend for 20 years, and I was very sad at his death. Call his office, 482-6340, and you will hear his voice. This is Dr. Griff Blakewood, Department of Renewable Resources. Please leave a message. He's not there. He's dead. They have not replaced Griff Blakewood. And to put a raspberry seed in their cavity, I'll say, could I please speak to Dr. Blakewood's replacement? There is no replacement.
No replacement.
But if we got students coming out of that university, if they're not being prepared for a future of renewable resources, then they're not being prepared for the future. I mean, the world is going to become carbon-free.
And I think, the caller touched on an important topic. How do we fix it? And you start with a mental attitude adjustment, and it has to start with our own legislature, state, and our own federal government, and we as citizens insisting for better care of the environment. We have all kinds of water quality laws that prohibit damaging water quality, and these laws are pretty much ignored.
Sure.
If it's agriculture wants to do it, and you got a big pig farm, and you got 300,000 cows out there in Nebraska, and their waste is going right into the Platte River. You can't offend those guys too much, because they're an important part of the economy, which they are, but they are also responsible for making sure their waste products are not out there to destroy the quality of the ocean, the quality of the rivers, and all the life that's in it. So important that we demand that of our politicians. And no one in the elections going on right now is talking about the environment. I mean, that's a poison word.
That's way down the list.
You on the air? Can we help you?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what the last caller was asking about, which is what do we do? And I think what we need to do is to make a major effort to publicize the desecration that's occurring, depletion of fish stocks, pollution, the acidification of the oceans. And we need to point the fingers where they need to go. Once, I believe, the public, and I hate to use the word, but I believe it's true, that the public becomes informed, I believe you'll see a revolution. And I think this revolution can occur if we mount a major campaign